Hey, Bob, thanks for joining today. I appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. So we met through it's a podcasting network, and it's when I read your biography, your bio, your brief bio, and some of your top line points. Man, you have an incredible background. I just to touch on a few things: a criminal trial lawyer, touching into Taoism, a teacher. I can't even go into the depth of where you've been in your lifespan, man. And even into some of what you put it was the Miami cocaine cowboy era. Is that right? And
Correct.
there was some representation with maybe some of people, the not side nice side of the world or something like that, we'll call it.
Uh,
Okay.
but let me define that. Now, not only
Okay.
that. And the mob in Miami, you have to understand, is a kind of a combination of a conglomerate of the Italians, along with the Haitians, along with the Colombians, along with the Cubans and the Peruvians
Wow.
and the Bahamians and the Biminians.
Is that just it's a major convergent point, the Miami
Well,
area? Is that
the cocaine comes out of it's farmed in Peru, brought to Colombia, and then the Colombian cartels ship it out. Some of it comes up the Pacific coast, some of it comes through the Florida Keys, and some of it goes through Haiti to the New York, and that's where the Italians have a say in the matter. The Haiti is a way station for the stuff headed to New York, and Bimini and Bermuda is a way station coming out of Cuba. So
wow? So
everybody, as Don Corleone said in The Godfather, when the fella came and asked him to lend him some of his judges, he said, "I'm sorry, I have to say no, but you'd go do what you need to do, especially since your interests do not conflict with my own."
oh my
And
God.
since the stuff going up the Florida Straits didn't conflict with the stuff going to New York, they were all able to work peaceably.
I'm sure within reason. I can't imagine them all playing nice in the same pool necessarily, but maybe some business respect there.
At the top levels was a lot of respect.
Okay.
At the medium levels, there was backstabbing and betrayal and terrible vengeance and stuff like that. But it
Man,
was
is that I guess I have to ask too, is that still a very active thing?
it is still active. Those are the days of the movie Scarface,
Yeah.
the TV show Miami Vice, and that background music and the vibe that they portrayed of Miami in those days, that vibe was really very accurate. It really was. The people
Yeah.
that directed that stuff were in Miami, no doubt. And but of course, many of the stories were fictional, but I tell you, I've got stories.
I could only imagine. And probably, I'll be honest with you, is sometimes much more dramatic and has depth than the movies could ever portray real life.
Yeah, yeah. Just think of today's political situation. You couldn't write all of that in the novel.
Yeah, you couldn't script it. Real life,
Could
honestly, you
not
couldn't script a
you
lot
could
of stuff.
not
And
script it.
just like the last, let's just call it 5 years with COVID and the world and the media and everything, this wouldn't even be imagined in a book.
I
It
know,
just,
no, no. Who would ever write in a book that somebody who was paying a lot of women for sex, doing drugs, having sex with 17-year-olds, taking bribes, and committing all kinds of crimes would be appointed to be the top law enforcement officer of the country?
my God,
How you could you if you wrote that in a
you couldn't
novel,
even
somebody would
script it.
say, "Yeah,
Right.
that's crazy, that's fantasy."
Yeah. It's like an inside job there or something.
But
I don't know. Oh man, you had that. I'll be honest with you. You've had lifetimes within lifetimes, if that's a fair way to say it.
that is
So going from that, I know that you have. I hate to say like a heavy involvement or an involvement with Taoism,
yeah,
and I'd actually like to. We started with that background, which I would have a million questions about that whole Miami background, but I really do want to get in a bit more into the Taoism, and maybe we'll throw a few at the end there.
yeah.
But so your introduction into that, and if you consider it a journey into spirituality, or if you just consider it something that you were meant to or stumbled on, if you could give a little bit of background
Sure,
into
sure,
your journey with.
sure, sure. Let me just back up a little bit and say a word about my dad and my family. So my dad was Hungarian royalty. However, he was born in 1898, to give you a time frame, and the Bolsheviks, we know in the Russian Revolution, the Russian Communist Revolution happened in the very beginning of the 19th century. After Russia became communist, the Bolsheviks invaded Hungary and took over there. And so the royalty was slaughtered. So all of our ancestors on my father's side were pretty much put to the knife. He escaped and came to America, met my mom, and she was Roma Gypsy. And so we know that everybody wiped out the Romans from time to time. So
Yeah.
on both sides of both of my parents, their ancestors were pretty much wiped out. One of the things that I've always felt a little bit different about is that people talk about their great grandparents and following their ancestry and all of that stuff. And my timeline goes back to my dad and stops.
Wow. So he was in exile then? He
No,
escaped? He
no,
must have barely escaped.
hey, yeah, and I guess he was next time, but he immigrated to America, so many others came through Ellis Island, found popcorn as the means and mechanisms of making the American dream come true. It was a new taste sensation from the Midwest in 1918. In 1932, he bought his first popcorn machine, and
The cart? Little cart? Like a
actually,
push cart or
he
something?
bought a machine and a caramel corn vat and got a
Okay.
concession at Rockaway's Playland in Queens, New York on the boardwalk.
That's really cool.
And he built it up and it was quite successful until in the late 40s, the mob came in because it's an ideal business for laundering money. They
Mm,
basically made him an offer he couldn't refuse and he wasn't left with much. This is like the archetypical hero's journey. He builds everything
yeah.
up, and the evil people come in and they take it away, and he had to build it back. Anyway, long story short, he was not an atheist. He didn't have anything against God. He just had a difficulty with the idea that there could be a merciful God with what he and my mom had gone through. And
Mhm.
so we didn't have that as a conversation in our family at all. We just didn't talk about it. So I didn't have any religious training or Sunday school or services. It just wasn't part of my life. And so I wound up becoming a lawyer and then I wound up hitting the mob for a lot of money and going out in private practice. And they came to me and they said I had to be pretty good to do that. And so they wanted to start sending me clients and they did. And I got this stream of clients who were mid level mules and wholesalers and distributors, and they would always come in and they'd have 9,000 bucks in cash. And I didn't ask where it came from. And if it was 10,000, of course, it would have to be reported to the feds as a cash
Mm.
transaction. So it was always under the limit. And I paid my house off and I was doing pretty good as a 34-year-old. But I was hanging out with them and I was doing a little too much cocaine. It was those days. It was all over the place. Everywhere you went, there were lines on tables, and my personal life was beginning to fall apart. And I was making some real stupid decisions about money and investments. Miami was this kind of crazy get rich today, and with the influence on my brain, it gives you a sense that you're invulnerable and there's no mistake that you can make.
There is no
There's no
concern for
tomorrow.
tomorrow.
Everything I do is right, and I'm king, and I'm the best, and I'm the smartest, and I'm the biggest. And naturally, you can't sustain that very long, and I was seeing a therapist. So, one day,
Were you married at the time or
I was
kids or
married
anything?
I was married, my wife was drinking, I was doing coke, my daughter started becoming anorexic, so things were falling apart pretty badly, and,
Sure.
I was seeing this therapist. So one day I go to him, and I had basically blown all this money, and I came to the point of having to refinance my house to support some of these crazy ideas that I had. So I asked him if I should do that. So he picked up some coins and he shook them in his hands and he threw them on the table and he looked at heads, tails, calculated, put down a number, drew a line, put a dot, did it again 6 times. He's thrown coins, making calculations, and he finally comes up with a number, big number he writes on the paper. Let's say it was 32. Then he reaches behind and he gets a book and he opens it to chapter 32 and shows it to me. And the title of the chapter is Retreat.
Oh,
He had 32 there. He looked up 32. He showed me the thing. So what did I say? I said, F you. And I stomped out because I was paying him 65 bucks an hour to be my therapist, not a soothsayer. And what was this crap that he was showing me? But it was the right advice. And
hmm.
I kept thinking retreat. So I walked into this business and I said, guys, this is over. I'm out of money. Closed. We're not doing that. I'm not going to do this. I'm out of this. And I started pulling back from many of my excesses and went back to George and I asked him, what was that? And he said, Bob, that was the I Ching. I said, what's the I Ching? And he says, it translates to be the classical book of changes. So where's that come from? Taoism. What do you know about Taoism? Turns out that George was the English language editor for 72nd generation master Taoist monk Watching Ni,
Okay.
who came from the Shaolin Temple. Think about this, 72nd generation. I figured
Jeez.
it out. That's 1,500 years of father to son wisdom
Right.
handed down, refined. Master Ni came to Miami, and the first time I'll never forget the first time I met him. Sometimes you just run into people or things or something that just burns in your memory because there's something about him. There was just something about him. The guy was 77 years old when I met him. He looked like he was 35. He could sit on his heels. He could walk on his knees. He chuckled. If you played hide and seek, you could never find him. He was just an amazing person, and we had so many great conversations with
Yeah.
about what mastery in life is and what Taoism is and what it taught and what going with the flow really
Sure.
means and the like. And I guess the biggest takeaway, if I was to take all of Taoism and put it into a nutshell, it would be that just an sometimes I think of the comment Bruce Lee made. He said, "I am not afraid of the man who has practiced 1,000 kicks. I am afraid of the man who has one kick 1,000 times."
Absolutely.
And so if you practice something, eventually you own it. And what the practice of Taoism, the practice is understanding the ebb and flow of the cycling of the universe and where it is on the cycle and how to align yourself with that.
Okay.
The best example I could give is if you were out in the ocean and you wanted to get to shore, there would be 3 ways to do it. One, you could panic and drown, right? The other would be you just swim into shore, not paying any attention to the waves or anything else. And when you got to shore, if you got to shore, you would be exhausted. The other way, the Taoist way, would be to notice when the tide is going in and when it's going against you. And when it's going in, put out your full effort when it's going into the shore. But when it's going against you, save your energy and
Mm.
hold your position, waiting for it to change. And so that you can swim heck again and hold, because life is ever cycling. Good times turn to bad times. And if things are bad, then simply learns to wait because they will start to get better. And if things are good, the Taoist will start to be worried about saving because he knows that it's going to go down. So if you're acting appropriately at the top of the cycle and at the bottom of the cycle, you're spending a lot less energy, but you're being more effective and more efficient at the same time. And that is, in a nutshell, the practice of Taoism. How to feel where you are on the cycle, what the energy is that's around you, and align yourself with it.
That's beautiful. So, 2 things. One is I wanna stick with the Taoism, but I do wanna jump back. You had mentioned with the retreat,
Mhm.
because retreat can actually be pretty. I remember reading a book about it was a Russian general when after the Berlin Wall fell, the Russia was trying to get out of Afghanistan, but the retreat cost them so dearly that they barely had enough out of it. So sometimes retreat, like it's hard once we've created, put so much momentum or we're clawed into our existence to get out of that. Did that experience when you started the stepping back, Did you take some hits to the chops or were you able to exit effectively out of that lifestyle?
I had George and I
Okay.
had Master Nee. And so there was a great support group all within that. So it's a great question what you're asking. So let me try to imagine for a moment, because you posed the question. What would it look like if two Taoists were talking about retreat, about chapter 32 in the I
Mhm.
Ching, retreat? What if they were
Okay.
talking about that like two Jewish rabbis arguing over the Talmud? You know? So it would look something like this. The example that you gave would be given by one, and the other would say, but the problem is that he missed the moment of retreat.
Mm,
Stayed too
okay.
long. You retreat in a way that is effective and efficient so that you can come back and regroup. You don't retreat to be destroyed. If you have stayed so long that you flee to be destroyed, that's not retreat. That's chaos. So again, it comes down to recognizing the timing and then aligning with it in an appropriate and wise way so that you don't have the mistake of staying too long
Mhm.
and then having it devolve into chaos. And
Interesting.
so
There's a real lesson there, and sorry, I was just gonna, because there's many times that we have as humans, we have this experience of we have these chaotic points of in marriage or money or relationships and these different aspects of our lives, and sometimes they cascade into the entirety of all of it, and that's a very interesting, I really like that perspective because I think back in a reflective way if I've had a collapse in a certain aspect, we'll say like money or business or something like that, it was because I knew that I had the telltale signs but I stayed. And it was the inaction
that's right.
of me continuing on doing the same thing every day, knowing in my gut's mind something's not right.
Right.
But the inaction of me not changing my environment led me to what it led me, but the evolute to the point of the destruction became
Mhm.
there was no retreat, it was an explosion or whatever version of
Right.
that is. That's very fascinating.
Yeah.
I did not look at it like that.
In Taoism, there are 64 times, and each of those times has 6 potential forces acting on it.
Okay.
So it's a methodical way of doing it. If I may, let me just randomly read you the names of some of the so retreat, critical mass, things have gotten to a
Critical mass, yes.
potential energy. There's a lot of stored energy here. It needs to be given away. Reform. Things have gotten corrupted. This is a time of reform. This is a time of promotion. This is a time of adapting. This is a time of being restrained. This is a time of unity. This is a time of collective force. This is a time of calculated waiting. So there are all of these different times that the I Ching goes into very specifically and talks about what it looks like, what it feels like, what some examples of it are. And as you practice the I Ching on a 15 minutes a day basis, eventually you get more and more familiar with these times. Generally speaking, chaos is the result of missing the appropriate time, and things will fall into chaos. Not acting appropriately a little bit earlier on.
Yeah.
It could have been avoided. And as you practice the I Ching, you get familiar with these and you even get familiar with the names. So in a situation like you mentioned, you would recognize this is a time of calculated waiting. This is a time of introspection. I've got some things going on in me that say I should stop and allow all of that to come up and spend a little time contemplating that time of
Yeah.
contemplation.
And
So, yeah.
you brought up a beautiful point with the tides, if
Mhm.
you're out at sea, because I wasn't sure where you were going when you were telling me that. Before you said the last part, you gave the 3 examples. I was like, "Okay," I anticipated you saying, but just allowing the tides or allowing that and there's an allowance, but there can be an action to it as well, but then you did illustrate when you have the momentum or you have the flow or you have the things are in that direction in that course, go at it, some version of that.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you said that because there is a sense of riding those energetic waves, not just being in a state of there's a state of allowance and then there's a
Uh-huh.
state of surrender and there's these different states. And I think there's times to apply them and And those are the things. So in the practice, I don't know if it's a question as much as maybe a statement. I can see the correlation with the identification you said with the practice of identifying these or having awareness of them. Now we can start to recognize when I
Mhm.
feel with my radar or barometer or
Right.
my gut instinct or my head instinct or my heart instinct, these things are not jiving or of balance. I can start to have awareness with those. And one of those times.
Mhm. The sad thought that went out of my mind, but it was, yeah, the trap of allowing is that old kiddie song, "Merrily, merrily, 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 life is but a dream, float downstream."
Yeah.
So the idea of going with the flow is like letting go, taking your hands off the wheel, laying back, floating down the river, and that's the trap. That ain't gonna work. You
Right.
still gotta navigate. Now, the Taoist, philosophically, says the less that you can interfere with the natural flow of things, the better off it is. My mentor, my legal mentor, Judge Kogan in Miami, he was the administrative judge of the Miami criminal justice system, and there were 14 felony courts and 12 misdemeanor courts in one building, and he was the administrative judge. And if
Wow.
you go into 13 of those courtrooms on a Monday morning, they are packed solid. They look like a battlefield. There's papers strewn all over the place. The air conditioning can't keep up with the body heat. It's just wretched. And all the lawyers are pushing their way through the crowds to get to the clerk. I'll be back. And it's crazy. You go into judge's courtroom and it's like an oasis. And it's just cool. Everybody's got, and one day I went in to see him and I go, "Judge, do you get less cases than everybody else?" He goes, "No, matter of fact, I have additional duties on top of my regular caseload." And I said, "Have you ever walked around here on a Monday morning and seen the other?" He goes, "Yes, Bob. Yes, I have." I said, "Well, you come into yours." And he said, "Bob, it's like this. If you pick an apple and it's not right, you're going to pull and you're going to struggle and you're going to twist and you're going to yank. And finally, when you get it, it's going to be sour. And if you wait too long, it's gonna drop and rot. But if you get it at just the right time, it's gonna come off easy and it'll be sweet." And I think that these other judges, they let their emotions and their ego get in the way. They're saying, "I'm not gonna let you make me continue this case, or I'm gonna take this case to trial." But it's not personal. Sometimes a case needs to be tried. Sometimes it needs to be continued. I think I just have a knack of knowing which is which.
That's amazing.
And I really took from that, and combined with all of the times of Taoism and everything else, I really took with that the sense of how important timing is,
Yeah.
you know?
I think you see that in business a lot too. There's people that do manage the storms around them, the chaos around them, and just doesn't let it penetrate
Mhm,
with them or get you swept away if so and so is angry at so, and it's easy to get wrapped up into the soap opera and the different mindsets and try to take sides and judgments and things like
mhm,
that. So
mhm.
the allowance, the surrender, there's a different way, and I don't mean to overcook this because you already really covered that. But laying back, I think there is an idea out there in the spiritual community of just the no action or just surrender to it all and just sit there in a cave and don't do anything. And I think the balance of the implementation is those things are where or overaction and not really putting thought into it and just being frenetic on the other side of that, just creating frenetic energy
Mhm, mhm,
and something will come out of it.
mhm.
I think there's I don't necessarily know if the word balance is really the right word.
Balance is the right word.
Yeah. Okay. I guess navigating that too, because there's the things inherently that we know instinctually or at a deep knowledge set. I believe that we have deep knowledge within us. I think some of the noise suppresses or confuses the environment time to time, but to I guess to let those inner voices speak. So when we speak about the Taoism or the Tao Te Ching, some of that, and I know it seems like I'm jumping, but I'm really trying to get to a point. And it's not quite coming out, but is it an allowance to hear the voice of that? Is it truly just inspired action? Is it a combination in there, or am I missing the mark with some of that thought process? Where I'm going with
The
that?
answer
Yeah.
to the question is, but what I did pick up on was when we talk about our intuition and speaking from the heart, there's sometimes a assumption that there is an inherent accuracy of that. And we have to be a little bit careful about that because we have been dumped on with an incredible amount of conditioning, from our culture, from our media, from our commercial life. And we don't have the biological tools to adequately deal with the fact that we are not living in the environment that we were evolved to live in.
Sure.
We were evolved to live in a place where there was a constant threat of danger, but the danger was identifiable and specific and dealable. You either ran or you fled or you fought. We could identify the danger. And we had very little salt, very little sugar, very little fat, and we had a lot of physical activity. And we're searching all day, hunter gatherers out there working all day with hard physical labor, very calorie non dense foods. Today, we go to a Happy Meal and we get more fat and sugar than we would have gotten in the jungle in a month. And you wonder why there's an epidemic of obesity because our body is not evolved. There may come a time in 10,000 years where we can consume all that stuff and it's not going to make us obese because we'll poop it out or something, because we'll evolve a shorter intestine. I don't know. But we're not that person. And
Sure.
so I would ask this question: if our bodies, you can obviously see that this environment is not the environment that our bodies were constructed for. We have to understand that neither is our mind and our brain and how it works. So, for example, when the tiger and the snake were the identifiable dangers, we dealt with it and it was over. But today, the dangers, which had the same biological effect on us, a deadline, a grade that we want to get, an assignment that we don't feel we're capable of doing, a job interview that we're coming up with that we don't think we're going to be hired, a promotion, all these things are dangers to us and they cause us internally, biochemically, to react the same way that it was danger, but they're not identifiable. And so they cause this chronic stress, which creates this cortisone eating up of our nervous system
Mhm.
and all kinds of stuff that comes from that.
Yeah.
Because of that, we understand. I have to watch what I eat and I have to go to the gym. I have to increase my physical labor and I have to be more careful about the fat and sugar and salt I put in my body. Okay, I lost 100 pounds and that's the only way to do it. Every time I didn't want to go to the gym, my wife would quote from that poem, Bob, being fat is hard and going to the gym is hard. Go choose your.
That's awesome.
I said, I'll take
That
that on. But our minds are constantly the right side of our prefrontal cortex, and you can see it in a picture. It's like firing away. The electrical activity up there is like going with the chronic stress. And what the brain scientists have found that it is nearly impossible to reduce the electrical energy there. It's nearly impossible to stop thinking negative thoughts, which are the product of chronic stress. But what is possible is to increase the electrical activity on the left side.
interesting.
So, one of the things that we know now is that exposing yourself to the glorious sunsets and the sense of awe, it's almost as if it is the positive countersuit to PTSD. It instantly changes your neural structures and it takes you to being someone you weren't before, just like PTSD does on the negative side. Surrounding yourself with beauty, cultivating and curating the people that you surround yourself with, the things that are on your desk, keeping things in some sense of order, doing crossword puzzles, course, meditating, which is probably the most direct route, but doing things that give you joy, it's not a waste of time. It's
Yeah.
important, and it is the intentional act that we must do to balance our lives if we want to have something other than to live in misery.
Yeah. So funny enough, you actually nailed exactly what I was trying to get to, which was awesome. And jumping into a couple different things to add on to it, I really liked the way you articulated with the physical aspect because now we're in more of a mental state of the world. The interactions, the dangers are not necessarily as visible. Are they legal? Are they just cancel culture? Are they somebody? Our concerns are different than an actual. Is this berry poisonous or not? To the
Right.
hunter gatherers. I don't want to say it wasn't a long time ago, but it really wasn't a long time ago in our human evolution through the Roman Empire, through that stretch. It really wasn't. You had talked about the 72nd generation of your mentor,
Mhm.
and that's not that long. At this point, there's a lot of that amygdala hijacking with a lot of the electromagnetic and all this intake of sensory that was never there before
Never.
with TV, computers, social media, everything, amount of information that's coming in. It's all necessarily bad, but there is an overload. So I guess where I was going, oddly enough, was that inner voice and the noise of the external world that this and you the way you said that that was great because we're not actually built for what is we have at hand in a sense. You didn't say it exactly like that,
Yeah,
but
you're right.
yeah, in the connection and our even too with the kids that are coming these days. I have 2 young boys and everything is computer and virtual realities and all the social medias and everything is just digital, So it's just a fascinating thing. And that wasn't when I was a kid. So that's one generation connection that it's such a massively different world. So the ability to have the silence of the mind and the awareness I don't wanna say that it's harder because that's a judgment, but I think at some level being attuned into the nature and understanding where your danger is coming from, if it's physical, even if it's another village that's coming to come and get your village or whatever that version is, where the clear and present danger is in a very real way. So I think that there really is something deep there. It's I'm not even asking a question. I think I'm just going off on a tangent.
I'm picking up on one thing you said about stepping away and getting the quiet to take a break. So that's a great segue, I think, into meditation. Is meditation about being able to break out for a minute and take a little break and get some quiet and peace in your mind? And if this was a game show, I would go, "Eh."
That's
No,
awesome.
you said it, but I'm just saying to that answer, because a lot of the time, the most common response that I get when people find out that I am a meditation teacher is something like, "Oh, yeah, I tried that once or twice. I just can't do that. There's no way that I can quiet my mind because the moment I sit down, my mind goes nuts and I start thinking about all I have racing thoughts, and there's just no way that I clear my mind." And but it depends on the context of the conversation. If that's just a passing thought and they're not asking me for my advice, then I just let it go. But the truth of the matter is that what they're talking about is relaxation. They're not
Mhm.
talking about meditation.
Okay.
Now, there's most of the apps that are out there are relaxation apps.
Yeah.
They're apps that give you white noise and the sound of rain, and they also have bedtime stories, and they also have relaxing affirmations and a guiding voice that's very soft and gentle that guides you into a relaxed state. And that is vitally important to our well being to take times to relax. And if you need some guidance and some help and some white noise, that's perfectly great and that's wonderful. I will tell you that it is so important because when we are not relaxed, when we are right side oriented, our minds narrow and constrict down. Our thinking is very narrow because we're trying to locate the source of our stress and solve it. And so that's all we can think about. And if we can't identify it, then our mind's jumping around looking for that source. And that's all we can do.
Mhm.
When we rest, and we relax the rest and digest side of it after a nice meal, we become more creative. Our mind, our thinking broadens and builds. You can think of the cavemen sitting around the fire at night telling the stories of the stars and creating all these fables because this is when our mind broadens and builds. Here's the kicker: our peripheral vision actually increases.
I've heard that before.
So we literally see the world more broadly. So it's vitally important to do it, but it's not meditation.
Okay, so just before we jump into it, I was gonna say that distinction is pretty powerful, and I think a lot of people don't understand that there is relaxation and meditation, and it's not about necessarily getting hung up on the words. There's an essence of it. I do have some questions about meditation, but I would love to hear you continue to go, and I'll ask as we go then.
Just a couple of examples. So you're driving along in a car and the car is taking you home. You know how that is, right? Your
Mhm.
mind's in what we call default mode. And
Yes.
you're thinking about what the guy said yesterday and what you're going to do tomorrow and what you got to get on the way home and then what you got to do when you get
Yeah.
home and you wonder what's for dinner. And then you should have said this to that guy and the boss is really an ass, but
But
going,
to that point is I'm not thinking about the directions, I'm not worried about turning
yeah,
left or
yeah,
right. I just know it. I'm programmed to go.
just you're on muscle memory and your mind's on default and it's just all over the place. All right. And a car gets a little bit too close to you, right? And you become attentive, right? So now you have your attention. Now you're in attention. You're attending to the matter, right? Before you weren't attending. Now you're attending. So that is the difference between default and attention. Most of the time, we live going in and out of these states automatically with no initiation, no intention behind them. So we don't have the opportunity to really examine those two states, default and attention. So, what we do in meditation is we set up a little premise, and it follows like this. I'm sure you've been in the situation where you really do want to listen to someone, but a thought pops in about, did I leave the stove on? And then you're off somewhere. And then at some point, you get this little startling feeling. It's like a little internal shake. Oh,
Sure.
I haven't been listening to the guy. I missed what he was saying, right? Then it's usually followed by a whole bunch of judgments. Oh my God, I shouldn't have been doing that. And I really wanted to hear what he wanted to say. And how am I going to get him to repeat it? And I don't want him to know I wasn't listening. But eventually, you stop all that and you go back and you start listening again, right?
Mhm.
You've been reading a book and then you realize you just done 3 pages. You don't remember a single word you read.
Oh,
You
yeah.
didn't read
I've
it.
done that.
But then, "Oh, I wasted all this time. How could I do that?" Then you go back to reread it. When you're listening to the guy and your mind wanders, that little startle that you get is your mind reminding you that your intention was to listen to the guy.
Mhm.
Your mind on another level realizes that you're not doing what you yourself said you wanted to do. And it reminds you that you're not doing it, which is a good thing.
Mhm.
But then we put all these judgments on it, but eventually, but when you get that little startle feeling, you're attending to your mind. Before you were in default mode.
Yeah.
Now you're attending. Okay.
Okay.
So what we do in meditation, the very first basic instruction is to form an intention to put your attention on a candle or on your breath.
Okay.
Okay. That's it. And then what happens is within 14 and a half seconds, your mind goes off into default, which is totally appropriate because in the jungle, you would be scanning for danger.
Mhm.
So that's what the mind is constructed to do.
Okay.
So there's nothing wrong with it. So your mind goes off and wanders, and then you go, oh, I'm not paying attention to the candle anymore. And then you have all these judgments. The difference is that now you're having the judgments, but you're noticing your judgments.
Okay.
Before you just had your judgments and you were your judgments. Now you're watching your judgments. So now 3 things have occurred. 1, You became aware of what default mode feels like. You became aware of what attending feels like, consciously aware, not automatically aware. And you also noticed, and you noticed that you noticed you're judging. If you repeat this simple exercise over 10 minutes today and 10 minutes tomorrow and 10 minutes the next day, all of a sudden, some really amazing things start to happen within even a week or two. All of a sudden, you start noticing that your judgments and that your thoughts are something that you are watching and that you're not your thoughts anymore.
Mhm.
And that is the moment where your true introduction to freedom starts.
Okay.
The moment you realize that I am not my thoughts, I am the creator of my thoughts and I can watch my thoughts. And then then all of a sudden you can't hold them, you can't sell them, you can't save them, you can't put them away. They come out of nowhere. They're here, and they go off into nowhere again. What are they? They're just impulses of electricity. They're nothing, and they've been ruling and controlling your life. That's nuts.
It's
Yeah.
nuts. Oh my god.
That's what you start saying to yourself. I've been controlled by these freaking thoughts. And within 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, all of a sudden it almost becomes comical. You start now the judgments become funny. Everything starts to be you start getting light with yourself.
Yes.
Giving yourself a little space and say, this is really amazing. And once you have created and you have a good handle on the basic skill of watching your thoughts, and you can do it through a body scan, paying attention to your body parts. You can do it through paying attention to the rising and falling of your chest. You can do it by paying attention to the feel of your feet on the floor as you walk. Then your mind drifts, and then you wake up and you come back, and your mind drifts, wake up, come back. So there's all kinds of different ways that you can do it, but it's still the same process of default, attending, returning, beginning again, default, attending, returning, beginning again. So the idea that your mind is racing and everything else, that's all just part of it.
Yeah.
That's expected and intended, and it's all just part of it. Once you cover the basics, you have got this down. And you can sit for 10 minutes and you come away giggling. Usually you do. Not all the time. A lot of times you come away giggling. Then we get down to the work of building up the electrical energy in the left side of the brain. Because now you've learned how to manage your thinking. So now we're going to move into cultivating loving kindness, cultivating compassion, cultivating sympathetic joy, cultivating equanimity, cultivating the sense of awe and feeling and gratitude. Not because it's going to make you a better person, but it will. And not because it's going to make the world a better place, although it will, but because that's going to balance all the crap on the right side and make you happy.
Yeah.
That's
Beautiful.
if you want to be happy, if you want to be happy for the rest of your life.
Right. That's what I was thinking when you said that too. That's why.
You have to intentionally create a balance of energies in your brain. And this is the best and easiest and most direct way to do that.
Beautiful. It's funny because the questions I had now feel silly, but it was more along the lines of a technical aspect. Like I
Go
was going to
ahead.
ask you about timing. Does it have to be 2 hours on the top of a mountain?
Great question.
Yeah.
So when people start, I generally ask for 10 minutes.
Hmm.
Pretty much everybody can do 10 minutes. Some people, they have to scale it back to 5. But fortunately, one of the schools that I'm certified in has created an entire digital infrastructure, and there is an app. Is you open the app and the guided meditation is on the app, and the instructions are there, and you listen for about 6 minutes, and then they give you 2 or 3 minutes of silence and then a closing minute. It's not very strenuous.
Yep.
You would be amazed at how fast that 10 minutes goes by.
Absolutely.
Then when you finish it, a little window opens up on the app, and you can dictate res how that was for you.
Okay.
So that every morning I get up when I have a class going, I get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and my 15 students all have their reflections and they've come to my dashboard. And I read every single one and I respond. Sometimes it's sweet. There's nothing I need to say. You got this. Sometimes it's paragraphs.
Yeah.
Somebody is struggling with, I couldn't keep my focus and I couldn't keep my concentration. And I suggest to them, let's try to lose the word focus. And it's not about focus, it's not about concentration. And
Mhm.
so I get to give them daily coaching, which is unique in the way that it's taught. Because imagine if you're trying to learn yoga, the difference between watching a video or listening to it on an app and having a teacher move your foot
Absolutely.
2 inches
Yeah.
over. You know,
The
you can.
teacher would be incredible, and that did there was one of the other questions was about some type of journaling or in
Mhm.
documenting afterwards, so then you have some baseline, and I think the other one too is that do you see a lot of things that just you answered it, but that come up, like somebody's really working through some anger, and it's just like, I could not relax, I just consumed by anger, and,
Yes, yes.
these things come out, and they didn't start that way, they came out during the process.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I have to, because I do have a master's in social work, so I have to draw a line
Sure.
between they're not there with me as a therapist, they're there with me as a meditation teacher. So I have
Mhm.
to use the tools, that meditation has for us to deal with those things. So if I had one student who wasn't engaging, although she voluntarily took the course, but she wasn't engaging. It's like going to the gym and looking at the machines. Oh, I know how to work that machine. I'm just, you're not gonna get on it. And I asked her why, and she hemmed and hawed and hesitated. And finally, she burst into tears and said, "Bottom line, I just don't feel like I deserve to be happy, and I
Mhm.
always sabotage myself." That's pretty powerful thing. But from a meditation point of view, the next question that I would come is, where in your body are you feeling that?
Mm, 'kay.
Immediately, that's something that's going to change your perspective. Where in my body am I feeling that? So she said, I feel it. I don't know. I said, yes, you do. Just take a moment. With a little bit of coaching, a little bit of prompting, she said, it's right up here in my upper left chest. I feel like it's throbbing, but it's not throbbing. I've never felt that, but that's her feeling, 'cause that's how she
Yep.
described it. I said, "Okay, now let's talk about exactly what's the thoughts?" And they go, "Oh, they're about this and about that." I said, "No, what is the language of the thoughts? What words are the thoughts using?" So, little by little, we mapped out what was going on with her, that she was having thoughts that said this and this, and she was having physical sensations that was this and this, and by doing that, I gave her a tool to be able to deconstruct the emotion, because that's what emotions are, a physical sensation combined with a thought.
Hmm.
Because if I said to you, I love you, but I don't have a feeling of yearning, that feeling of an arm reaching out to my chest to want to touch you, it's just an intellectual comment. And if I had the physical sensation without the thought, I think I had indigestion. Right? So it's those things. And so there is a way, being mindful of our physical sensations, bring us back to the present moment. When you start looking what physical sensation, you're in the moment.
Yeah.
When you're thinking, I don't have the right to be happy, you're catastrophizing out into the future about how miserable my life's going to be and how miserable it's been. We're not in the present moment. We're not here at all.
Yeah,
So,
fascinating. Because I was gonna say with the physical body, not to get past that, it was, our body expresses itself, it's a very powerful connection point, but to connect the meditation to the body, I think that's an incredibly insightful way.
that's why we do body scans.
Yeah,
We do body scans because if you do body scans on a regular basis, you become intimately familiar with the different sensations that come from the different parts of your body.
yeah,
Or when you have a sensation, your mind can go to, oh, that's in my knee, or that's in my leg, or that's in my thigh, or that's in my chest, or that's in my back. You
yeah,
know where it is immediately. Otherwise, we're so out of touch with our body.
Sure.
We don't even know that we're having a physical sensation.
Do you find that it ends up being a two-way communication? So it's instead of the body scan, the body starts telling you stuff once you become more attuned to it?
Breathing is for somatic relaxation. We
Mhm.
actually put our fingers on our belly button and lay down and try to breathe deeply and push our belly out and then exhaust. What we're doing by doing that is we are creating neural stimulation to the diaphragm.
Mhm.
The diaphragm is feeling this. And as we breathe slowly, the diaphragm is sending a signal to the brain, we're out of danger.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Very fascinating.
It
Yeah.
it it sends a signal along the vagus nerve to the brain that says we're out of danger. The brain sends a signal to the heart, you can slow down.
Oh my gosh, that's incredible.
Yeah, so
Is it
we can actually go from the brain to the body and from the body to the brain,
Yeah,
and the vagus nerve is the mind-body connection. It's the longest nerve in the body, it connects the brain, it even connects the neck. When I'm listening to you and I do this, that's a vagus move. It's a
interesting.
vagus nerve move, and it
Okay.
goes down and it touches the heart, and it touches the lungs, and it touches the intestines and all the organs.
Fascinating. Okay.
When you say, "It broke my heart," that may be more literal than figurative.
Yeah. What about too there are other forms of tapping as well too, like
Mm,
along the collar and temples, and I know there's one that's called like onomotopono or something like that, and it's some type of forgiveness ritual, but there is the tapping and the neural connection point.
Ho'oponopono.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So, yeah, are those some of the practices as well, or is it the breathing is a very powerful one. Some
You
is
there
extremely powerful.
you what you're doing is you're asking a foot doctor about the heart.
Ah, I got it.
You
I
know?
love it.
Yeah, there's so many practices, and to really understand them as a teacher, you need to know them intimately, but as to Ho'oponopono, there's four blessings. I love you, please forgive me, thank you, and I'm sorry.
Yes, that's it.
So, we were coming back from Asheville once, and we found a podcast on Ho'oponopono, and we listened to the whole thing for 3 hours along with another book that we got on the way. We never got into Ho'oponopono, but we do have a ritual in our marriage now, which is a joke, it's funny, but if I do something that pisses her off, I go, "I'm sorry, I love you, thank
Love
you, forgive me," and she usually cracks up laughing,
right, right.
and so it has had its purposes.
Nice. I love it. So, well, last question on meditation. I was just gonna say, what about walking meditation? Is
Walking meditation is terrific for people that are a little uncomfortable sitting,
Mhm.
and you get to go up, and we can't sit all around. Mm, there's a couple of different walkings. There's default walking where you're just walking and your mind's going off and blah blah. There's something that we call purposeless walking, which is intentionally having no purpose and meandering. Generally, you want to do it in a botanical garden or a
Just
forest,
open area expanse or something like
something like that, but having no destination and just coming to whatever attracts you and doing whatever your heart tells you to do. So if you see a flower that you like, you go over and stand by it until you
that.
go, but having just purposeless, intentionally purposeless walking. And then there's walking meditation is actually the same thing as breath meditation or candle meditation because you walk very slowly and you feel your heel touch down and you feel your weight roll forward onto your foot. And then there's the foot behind, and you feel the weight transfer and moving forward. And so it is your intention to keep your attention on the sensation of your feet walking, and then your mind wanders, and then you notice that it wandered, then you come back, and then you do it again, and you begin again. And so it's the same practice. There is one additional aspect to it that the monk Thich Nhat Hanh taught, which I just love. And he said that as we walk, we leave footprints for whoever follows behind us. And we
Mm,
can leave footprints of anger or footprints of peace and love. And so, in doing walking meditation, focus on touching the earth and healing the earth and leaving footsteps.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And if you do that, it is a very powerful practice that opens the heart
That's
and
beautiful.
develops
Beautiful.
compassion.
Yeah, I really like that. Like that a lot. So, Bob, thank you so much for joining today. I truly
Mm.
and so how can anybody find you or what's the best way to work with you or seek you out?
Really, it's really easy. I have everything on one website. So I write some poetry. I write letters to friends. Just, just friends. Sometimes I see people suffering and I just say they don't have to. And I want to write a letter. So sometimes I just write letters. My poems, my letters are there. My books are there. My courses, of course, are there. But also, I've written a couple of ebooks that are freely downloadable. One is an introduction to meditation, and the other is 25 relaxation tips,
Okay.
and they're free. There's no obligation. Just come onto the website and click on the button and download it, and it's yours.
Beautiful.
And
What
the name of
what is
it
that website?
is awiseandhappylife.com.
A wise and
Wise,
happy
yeah.
life.com. Beautiful. All right. Again, thank you so much, Bob. I appreciate it.
You have a blessed life.
I love it.